My name is Audrey Kincaid, and until an hour ago, I was the senior systems architect for one of the largest financial data firms on the West Coast. Now, I was just a woman trying to balance a soggy cardboard box on her hip, while two security guards, men I'd known for years, gripped my arms and marched me through the lobby. Their hands were firm, their faces set in a mask of professional neutrality, treating me like some common criminal. The rain hammered against the glass facade of the building, blurring the scene inside the main conference room. Through the streaks of water, I could see them all: my entire former team, the executives, and my new boss, Griffin. They were raising champagne glasses, laughing, gathered around her. Chloe, barely 25, with a dazzling smile and a resume fresh from Stanford, was the center of attention while balloons bobbed against the high ceiling. My personal effects, a framed photo, a stress ball, a few worn technical manuals, sat in that dampening box. 20 years of my career. 20 years of 60-hour weeks and missed dinners, reduced to pulp. I caught Griffin's eye through the glass. He was 37, the golden nephew of the chief executive officer, Mr. Vaughn, and he'd been my boss for exactly 6 agonizing months. He saw me watching, and that perfect, practiced smile whitened. He lifted his champagne flute higher, a direct, mocking toast, just for me. Even through the downpour and the thick glass, I could read his lips. "She'll fix your mess." 20 years. That's how long I had been building secure systems, the last 8 of which were dedicated solely to perfecting the core. 8 years of my life poured into creating the digital fortress that protected billions of dollars in daily transactions and the private data of millions of clients. 8 years of solving impossible logistical puzzles, of anticipating threats no one else saw. All while Griffin and the board gradually cut my support team, replacing seasoned engineers with automated scanners. 8 years of creating something revolutionary, something that learned, something that felt like me. "We're pursuing more innovative approaches, Audrey," Griffin had announced 30 minutes earlier, his voice smooth as he slid that empty box across his sterile glass desk. "Someone with, shall we say, more contemporary methodologies." I hadn't argued. I hadn't begged or raised my voice. I just nodded, feeling something vital inside me shut down like a blown circuit breaker. The security guard, Frank, who had nodded "good morning" to me for 15 years, now meticulously avoided my eyes as he watched me load the drenched box into the trunk of my car. "Just protocol, Audrey," he mumbled, his voice tight with embarrassment. "Nothing personal." I sat in my driver's seat, the engine off, just watching the celebration continue through the rain-blurred windows. They hadn't even waited until I was off the property. They had been grooming Chloe for months, ever since Griffin brought her in as a consultant. She was his protege, the rising star with her specialization in predictive artificial intelligence, who questioned my methods in every single meeting. "Wouldn't a machine learning approach be more efficient than your manual heuristics?" she would ask, her tone implying I was a dinosaur, never having worked a day in a real-world crisis where a single data breach could bankrupt the company. I turned the key, and the engine rumbled quietly. Contemporary methodologies, innovative approaches. It was all just polished corporate language for, "We don't understand what you built, so we're replacing you with something shinier and cheaper." The highway stretched ahead as my wipers fought the downpour. I had poured 8 years into that core system. Every lesson learned from 20 years of cyber attacks. Every near miss that taught me something new. Every financial disaster averted because the system caught what human eyes and automated scanners missed. My system wasn't some cookie-cutter program you could buy off the shelf. This was invisible architecture, a fortress built on my own intuition. It was a living ecosystem that ensured data integrity, that detected fraudulent transactions before they cleared, that spotted threat actors based on behavioral patterns so subtle that no algorithm could define them. At 52, with reading glasses perched on my nose and a preference for practical code over flashy interfaces, I didn't look like their idea of innovation. But I had learned something Chloe and her algorithms never could, that real security comes from understanding human nature, greed, impatience, arrogance, not just data patterns. You see, Griffin Vaughn wasn't just some random executive hire. He was the son of the board's chairman, the nephew of the chief executive officer. He had been groomed for management since college, fast-tracked through departments without ever having to manage a real crisis. And Chloe, she was his protege, his proof that he could modernize the company. It was a family power play disguised as corporate restructuring. The Vaughn were consolidating power, pushing out any senior staff who might challenge their vision of how things should run, replacing experience with loyalty.
I couldn't fully explain it to him. The system worked because I had spent 8 years learning the invisible patterns of the financial world, how market volatility affected threat levels, how internal server loads created micro-vulnerabilities, how human psychology played into phishing attempts. I had coded my own experience into that system, made thousands of micro-adjustments that no manual could ever capture. Then Mr. Vaughn decided it was time for his nephew to make his mark. Griffin was promoted to Vice President of Operations with a mandate to streamline legacy systems. Translation: find ways to cut costs and put his family's stamp on everything. Just to improve efficiency, Griffin had assured me with that thin smile when he first arrived, the board wants fresh perspectives. Griffin, with his expensive degree and his theories about digital transformation. Griffin, who gradually started appearing in high-level security meetings I wasn't invited to. Griffin, who somehow gained access to my system architecture blueprints. He was the one who nodded sympathetically while I worked late, saying, "You should really update your skill set, Audrey," all while quietly cataloging my methods to feed to his protege. The Vaughns had played this perfectly. Bring in Chloe as a consultant, let her study my work for months, then position her as the innovative replacement while painting me as the stubborn old-timer holding back progress. I should have seen it coming. The first night after being fired, my phone stayed silent. The second day, too. They were probably congratulating themselves on their brilliant, cost-effective personnel decision. The heart of their operation, my creation, was now in Chloe's manicured hands. I sat on my balcony that second evening, watching the city lights flicker to life. 8 years of my life, erased with corporate buzzwords and a champagne toast. I had been a fool to think experience mattered anymore, that building something irreplaceable would make me irreplaceable. But they had all made one critical, catastrophic mistake. They thought my system was just code and hardware, something any smart engineer could figure out given enough time. They had no idea it was more like a living organism, one that required constant, intuitive care. They had no idea it was built to protect itself, not just from outside threats, but from internal ones. Sleep didn't come easily. I paced my small apartment, looking at books I'd never had time to read, opening cabinets full of instant coffee and protein bars. Who was Audrey Kincaid without the core system? What was left of me when the work that had defined my entire adult life was handed to someone else? I had given everything to that place. When my husband finally left, he said, "You love that system more than you love me." I didn't argue, because in that moment, part of me knew he was right. When my daughter stopped calling, when my son got married without me there because of another zero-day exploit, I told myself it was all for the greater good. All those clients, all that data, depending on me. Now they had Chloe, with her Stanford degree and her family connections, and I was just another casualty of corporate efficiency. Dawn broke on day 3, and I was making coffee when it started. My personal phone, the one not tied to the company, buzzed on the counter. A single alert from a private channel I had built into the system's foundation, an alert that bypassed all company servers. It wasn't a warning from an external attack. It was an internal permissions query. Root-level access attempt initiated by admin, Chloe. Attempt failed. I watched the notification for a long moment. She was getting impatient. The system had refused her command. I knew, with the certainty of an architect who knows every single load-bearing wall, that with her arrogance, she wouldn't stop there. An hour later, another alert. Root-level access attempt initiated by Chloe. Attempt failed. She was trying again, probably frustrated, probably blaming my clunky design for her inability to get the access she felt she deserved. I sat on my sofa, coffee in hand, and for the first time in days, I almost smiled. By that afternoon, the alerts stopped. They were replaced by something else. A frantic-looking email forwarded to my personal account from David, one of my last remaining allies in the data integrity department. The subject line was just FYI, urgent. The body of the email was a company-wide memo from Griffin himself, announcing minor server latency due to planned system optimizations. I knew instantly what that meant. Chloe, frustrated and humiliated by the system locking her out, had decided to stop asking for permission. She had decided to optimize it.
The system began to react immediately. It wasn't a crash, not yet. It was something more insidious. It was data poisoning. The core system, sensing a conflicting, unauthorized program, began quarantining the data Chloe's AI was trying to process. From the outside, it would look like Griffin's server latency. But I knew the truth. Small transaction batches were failing. Data integrity reports were coming back corrupted. It was a cascade failure, starting small, but it was gaining momentum. She had just pulled the pin on a grenade and was now complaining about the ticking sound. This brought us to day 4. The minor latency was now a major problem. Clients were likely calling, complaining that their transaction reports were missing data. Griffin was probably panicking, his reputation and his modernization project blowing up in his face. And Chloe, she would be desperate. She would be looking for someone to blame. And that someone would be me. I knew, with absolute certainty, that she had convinced herself that I had left behind malware, a dead man's switch designed to sabotage her. Her arrogance wouldn't allow her to believe that her software was the problem. She would believe she was the hero, hunting for my trap. And that's exactly when the final alert came through, the one I had been dreading and anticipating in equal measure. It wasn't a failure notice. It was a status update. Priority 1 alert. Unauthorized access to system black box initiated. Admin, Griffin. Deadlock protocol engaged. My breath caught. The black box. She had gone for the black box. It wasn't just a log file. It was the immutable, encrypted, write-once archive of every transaction, every change, and every access attempt, demanded by federal regulators. It was the one part of the system I had made untouchable, the digital equivalent of a bank vault's flight recorder. Accessing it without a federal warrant wasn't just bad practice, it was a felony. In her desperation to find my sabotage, Chloe had convinced Griffin to use his top-tier credentials, the keys to the entire kingdom, to break into the most legally sensitive part of the network. The deadlock protocol was my last resort, a measure I had built in collaboration with the legal department years ago. It had one simple function. If the black box was ever accessed by an unauthorized internal administrator, the system would assume a catastrophic, high-level breach was in progress. It would preserve the evidence at all costs. The trap had just snapped shut. The first thing that happened was the silence. My diagnostic screen, usually a constant waterfall of text, froze. Then, a single red line. System locked. Integrity protocols engaged. It wasn't just a failure anymore. It was a full stop. The deadlock protocol wasn't designed to fix the problem. It was designed to freeze it. It instantly halted every single transaction. It froze the email servers. It froze the internal networks. And, as a final security measure, it deactivated every electronic keycard in the entire building, locking everyone in or out. My phone buzzed. It was Chloe. I watched her name flash on the screen, letting it ring until it went to voicemail. 3 minutes later, another call. Griffin. I ignored it. Then Chloe again, then Griffin. For the next hour, my phone vibrated incessantly on the coffee table. 8 missed calls from Chloe, 15 from Griffin. I finally slept soundly that night. Morning broke on day 5, and I was making coffee when I received a text. It wasn't from them. It was from David, my ally. They've shut us down, completely. Doors won't open, nothing works. They're telling us it was a catastrophic external attack. But the internal monitors are all frozen on a message about data integrity. Audrey, what's going on? I didn't reply. They thought they were replacing me. They didn't realize they had just locked themselves inside a fortress I had designed to be impenetrable, even from the inside. 2 hours later, my apartment buzzer shrieked. I knew who it would be before I even pressed the intercom. Griffin's voice, usually so smooth and controlled, was raw, cracking with panic. Audrey, open the door. We know you're in there. I buzzed them up, not out of kindness, but because I wanted to see their faces. I opened my apartment door just as they stumbled out of the elevator. Griffin looked awful. His expensive suit was wrinkled, his hair a mess, and dark circles shadowed his eyes. Beside her, Chloe looked like she hadn't slept in days. Her Stanford confidence had completely cracked, replaced by a pale, terrified mask. Audrey, Griffin said, attempting a friendly smile that didn't reach his desperate eyes. We've had a situation. A situation? Or the contemporary methodologies you were so excited about?
Griffin's face hardened. "What did you do?" he hissed, dropping all pretense. "You sabotaged us. You left a time bomb in the system. This is criminal." I actually laughed. It was a short, sharp, humorless sound. "You think I deliberately built a self-destruct mechanism? You think I'm that reckless?" "Then explain it," Chloe burst out, her voice high and shaky. "Explain why the entire network is frozen, why the logs are all locked, why the federal compliance monitor is flashing red. You have to undo it." I took another slow sip of coffee. "First," I said, my voice dangerously calm, "I don't have to do anything. You made that clear 3 days ago." I looked past Griffin, staring directly at Chloe, who flinched. "Second, the system isn't broken. It's working perfectly. It's doing exactly what I designed it to do." "What are you talking about?" Griffin demanded. "I designed the core to protect the company's data at all costs, from all threats, external and internal. It's designed to stop unauthorized personnel from illegally accessing legally protected, immutable data. Like, for example, the system black box." The color drained from both their faces. Griffin looked at Chloe, his eyes wide with a new kind of horror. "You," he started to say to her, but Chloe was staring at me. We were looking for your malware," she whispered, the excuse sounding pathetic even to her. We were trying to fix the latency." "You weren't fixing," I corrected her, my voice turning to ice. "You, Chloe, installed an unauthorized, conflicting program that corrupted the data flow. Then, to cover your tracks or prove your paranoid theory, you convinced him,
I nodded at Griffin, to use his credentials to commit a federal crime. You didn't find my malware, Chloe. You were the trap. The system just identified you, neutralized the threat, and froze the evidence, just like it was built to do. I looked back at Griffin, who seemed to be in shock. Now, you're going to leave my property. You have a much bigger problem than me. You're not dealing with a server failure. You're dealing with a federal compliance violation triggered by your own administrator key. Chloe just stared, her mouth open. But how do we unlock it? I started to close the door. Wait, Griffin yelled, putting his hand on the frame. We'll pay you a consulting contract. Triple your salary. Just fix this before Mr. Vaughn finds out. Find out? I almost laughed again. Griffin, the deadlock protocol automatically sends a priority alert to the chief executive officer, the head of legal, and the federal regulators. They already know. They've known since yesterday. I watched the last bit of comprehension dawn on his face, the pure, unadulterated terror. I closed the door, engaged the deadbolt, and went back to my coffee. The click of the deadbolt sliding into place was the only sound in my apartment, a stark contrast to the storm of panic I had just shut out. The silence that followed felt heavy, final. My personal phone remained quiet for the rest of the day. The frantic, desperate calls from Griffin and Chloe had stopped completely. They had finally understood that their problem was far beyond me and far beyond their control. They weren't just locked out of a system. They were locked into a consequence. I spent the afternoon watching the city lights come on, methodically drinking my coffee, which had long since gone cold. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt a strange, cold calm. I built a fortress designed to withstand any attack, and I had just watched it effortlessly repel the most dangerous threat of all, the arrogant incompetence from within. Just as evening settled, my phone buzzed with a text message. It was from David, my former colleague, the one who had forwarded me the warning memo. His message was short, the words typed in a hurry. Audrey, it's chaos. They finally got us out of the building, but it's not just our internal security. The feds are here. Dark suits, jackets. I saw SEC on them. A second text came through immediately after. They aren't inspecting. They have a warrant. They are seizing the servers. They just took Griffin and Chloe into separate conference rooms. They separated them. I read the message, but I felt no surprise. This was the logical, automated conclusion of the deadlock protocol. The system wasn't just designed to freeze. It was designed to report. When Chloe and Griffin had used a top-tier administrative key to access the immutable black box logs, they hadn't just tripped an alarm. They had signed a confession. They hadn't just broken a company rule. They had, in the eyes of the Securities and Exchange Commission, committed an act of intentional data tampering. They were trying to alter the unalterable, and the system I built had caught them in the act and immediately called the police. My phone stayed silent for the rest of the night. The storm was raging at the corporate headquarters, but I was in the eye, perfectly still. I knew they couldn't call me for help anymore. This was a federal matter. The next call came at 7 in the morning. I let it ring 3 times, just long enough for him to know I was in control. Then I answered. I said nothing. Audrey? His voice was not the booming, confident baritone I remembered from company meetings. It was strained, exhausted, gravelly. We have a situation here. I waited. He took a sharp breath, clearly frustrated by my silence. The agents, they're still here. They've been here all night. They are using terms I don't like, Audrey. Willful data tampering, intentional destruction of immutable records. They're threatening to shut us down, to freeze our assets. He paused, and for the first time, I heard a crack in his corporate armor. My nephew, Griffin, he was arrogant. He was a fool. He let that girl run rampant with his credentials. They've admitted to accessing the logs. They were looking for sabotage, I said, my voice flat. There was no sabotage, he snapped, then quickly regained his composure. No, of course not. There was just your system. They don't understand it. And frankly, neither do our lawyers. The agents believe the system is compromised. We need you to explain it. Explain what, Mr. Vaughn? That it worked? Audrey, please, he said, and the desperation in his voice was palpable. The board is convening an emergency session at 9 this morning. The agents from the commission will be present. I need you to be there. I need you to unlock the system. I need you to make this go away. There it was, the offer. We are prepared to offer you a consulting contract 5 times your previous salary, a signing bonus, whatever you want. Just fix this. This system isn't what's broken, Mr. Vaughn, I said quietly. And what needs to go away is not my protocol. It's the culture that allowed Griffin and Chloe to believe they were untouchable. He was silent. He knew he had lost all leverage. What do you want? He finally asked, the 3 words heavy with defeat. I'll be at the meeting. I am not coming as a consultant. I have an entirely different request. I ended the call before he could reply. I showered and dressed carefully, not in the tired suits I used to wear to work, but in the sharp black designer suit I saved for special occasions. I walked back into that building, the one I had been marched out of 5 days prior. The security guard, Frank, who had avoided my eyes as he escorted me out, now held the lobby door open for me, his head bowed. Miss Kincaid, good to see you. The boardroom was tense, the air thick with fear and the smell of stale coffee. The entire board was present, their faces pale. The company's legal team was clustered in a corner, whispering frantically. And at the far end of the long mahogany table sat 2 stone-faced individuals, a man and a woman, in dark conservative suits, the federal agents. And in the seats farthest from the door, looking small and broken, were Griffin and Chloe. They didn't look up when I entered. Mr. Vaughn stood. Thank you all for coming. Miss Kincaid is here to explain the anomaly and help us restore functionality. The female agent cut him off, her voice like ice. We're past that, Mr. Vaughn. Miss Kincaid, we understand you are the architect of the core system. Can you explain in simple terms why your system is currently holding billions of dollars in client assets hostage? I walked to the head of the table, placing my tablet down. I didn't look at the board. I looked directly at the agents. Gentlemen, madam, I began, my voice calm and projecting easily across the room. The system is not holding anything hostage. It is and has been operating perfectly. It is protecting the evidence. A murmur went around the table. The lead lawyer winced. The core system, I continued, was designed in collaboration with your own regulatory guidelines. It is required by law to maintain a permanent, unalterable, write-once log of all transactions and all administrative access. We called it the black box. The primary function of my system is to ensure that log is never, ever tampered with. I turned slightly, gesturing toward Griffin and Chloe. The system has a final defense, a deadlock protocol. It activates if and only if a high-level administrator, like a vice president, uses their executive credentials to illegally bypass security and access those sealed, immutable logs. When that happens, the system assumes a catastrophic internal crime is in progress. It does not crash, it freezes. It locks every transaction, every email, and every door to preserve the data integrity from the internal threat. It is designed to protect the evidence. I paused, letting the weight of my words sink in. And then it does its final job. A sudden pause and include a deep breath. It automatically sends a priority 1 alert detailing the breach to the chief executive officer, the head of legal, and the Securities and Exchange Commission. I looked back at the agents. The system wasn't sabotaged. It didn't fail. It simply executed its legal compliance protocol. It worked exactly as intended.
The room was dead silent. Every eye turned from me to Griffin and Chloe. Griffin was sputtering. She thought there was malware. We were trying to protect the company. The male agent just looked at him with disdain. You used your credentials to access sealed federal compliance logs. We call that tampering with evidence, Mr. Vaughn. Chloe just stared at her folded hands, tears streaming silently down her face. The lawyers frantically whispered for them to stop talking, but it was too late. The system had already said everything. The tension in the room broke. The agents had their culprits. The board had its explanation. Mr. Vaughn, seeing his company had been saved from an immediate shutdown, looked at me, his face a mixture of relief and apprehension. The agents began packing their briefcases, nodding to Griffin and Chloe. You'll be coming with us. We have more questions. As they were being escorted out, in the same humiliating way I had been, Mr. Vaughn turned to me. Audrey, he said, his voice quiet, your terms, what are they? I looked at the remaining board members, who were all watching me as if I held the keys to their kingdom, which in fact I did. My terms are not negotiable, I said clearly. First, Griffin Vaughn is terminated for gross negligence and abuse of credentials, effective immediately. Second, Chloe is, of course, banned from the premises and all systems for life. And third, I continued, I will return, but not as an architect. That vulnerability, Griffin's ability to overrule me, can never happen again. You will create a new board-level position, Chief Information Security Officer. I will report only to the board and to Mr. Vaughn. I will have full, absolute autonomy over the core system, my own budget, and my own hand-picked team. And, I added, my compensation will be triple my former salary. A board member started to speak. That's highly unorthodox. I cut him off. These are the terms. Or you can try to find someone else who can unlock that system before the markets open tomorrow. If you even can. Mr. Vaughn looked at the pale faces of the board members, then back to me. He didn't hesitate. Those terms are accepted. With the finality of a man signing away his power. The board will ratify the new position immediately. Welcome back, Miss Kincaid. I didn't smile. I just nodded. I walked out of the boardroom, cast the main conference room where they had thrown that party. It was empty now, the balloons long since deflated. I took the elevator up to the executive floor and walked into the large corner office that had, until an hour ago, belonged to Griffin. I sat down at his desk, my desk. I plugged in my personal laptop and accessed the system's root terminal. The screen was still flashing a single line in red. System deadlock. My fingers moved over the keyboard, typing a single command, the authorization code only I knew. In the hallway, I heard the faint chime of the email servers coming back online. The hum of the building's ventilation system returned. The digital heart of the company started beating again. They had thrown a party when I left, celebrating my replacement with champagne and laughter. Now, I was in the corner office. I was running the whole party. Sometimes the strongest move isn't to fight back, but to simply step away and let the consequences of incompetence speak for themselves. True, irreplaceable value doesn't need to scream. It just waits. If you've ever quietly held your ground, knowing your work would stand the test that others would fail, you are not alone. If this story spoke to you, show your support by liking, commenting, and sharing it with someone who understands that sometimes the best revenge is simply being right.